Well, welcome everyone to our webinar today on donor advised funds, specifically catered to potential donors to donor advised funds. And the question on the screen is what we'd like you to be posing to yourself. Should I set up a donor advised fund for myself and my family? My name is Jim Murphy. I'm the Managing Program Director over Endowment Management, Planned Giving, and Donor Solutions here at the Episcopal Church Foundation. And we're very pleased to have you for this webinar. I'm very happy to be joined by two wonderful folks, both of whom have donor advised funds. The first is Sherry Kenny, who actually is both a donor advised fund holder as well as someone at the Presbyterian Foundation who is a ministry relations officer who does a variety of things, helping them to expand their mission and ministry at the Presbyterian Foundation. Additionally, we're joined by Father Scott White, who is the rector of Trinity Church in Asheville, North Carolina. So thank you, Father Scott and Sherry, for joining us today, and we'll be right back and introduce you again in a second. So very briefly, for those of you who don't know the Episcopal Church Foundation, we are the foundation for the entire Episcopal Church. We are an independent and lay-led organization. What we mean by that is that our board is entirely made up of lay folks. And though we love our priests and our bishops and deacons, they are not part of our board, and it's rather a unique thing in the Episcopal Church to have a completely lay-led board. We focus on empowering congregations through visioning, planning, leadership development, and raising financial resources for your ministry at your congregation. We do this in a variety of ways through a variety of programs. Including ones you probably already know about in our leadership resources area. Many of you out there listening to this recording will be familiar with ECF's very popular Vital Practices website, where we hold all of our webinars. And you may also get access to a number of other leadership resources that will be beneficial for you and your congregation. Many of you are also familiar with other things that we do in leadership resources, from our vestry resource guide, our fellowship partners program, and many other things we do to raise the capacity of leadership throughout the Episcopal Church. We also have a number of financial resource areas, including a capital campaign area where we can work with any Episcopal entity on a sliding fee scale to assist you with your capital campaign should you need it. We're the main resource for planned giving throughout the Episcopal Church, have a wonderful endowment management program where we can not only help you invest your funds, but for free can certainly assist you in constructing your endowment and gift acceptance policies. In addition to that, we can assist you in a variety of ways with your annual giving and stewardship and strategic resources in planning for those needs for your congregation. Today's webinar is focused on donor advised funds, and we wanted to have this brief webinar focus on actual donors, and that's what we'll do in just a moment. But for those of you who don't know what a donor advised fund is, a donor advised fund is very similar to a family foundation. We often call a donor advised fund a charitable checking account, where, as you can see from this brief image on the screen, that donors make their contribution all at once at one time. They can make additional contributions over time, but for each contribution they make, they receive a full tax-deductible gift, which they are able to write off of their taxes, and over time they're able to advise on making grants to a number of different charities. Now, that is a very useful tool, and many local foundations and other entities may have donor advised funds. We're very happy that the Episcopal Church Foundation has been able to partner with the Presbyterian Foundation to create a new Episcopal-centered donor advised fund. Although you don't have to be Episcopal to create it, we've created it specifically to benefit Episcopal organizations, parishes, dioceses, schools, camps, and all other Episcopal organizations all across the country. We made the decision to make the minimum donation to our donor advised fund very low at $2,500 to make it accessible to practically everyone throughout the country, and have allowed grants to be made from the donor advised fund for $100 or more. So you can give to your local parish or other charities which you wish. You can do this through an online portal that we have created in collaboration with our friends at the Presbyterian Foundation. You have numerous investment options to help your gifts grow over time, because you don't have to give it out all at once. You can choose, as the advisor on a donor advised fund, when those grants go out. The only main limitation that you have is it must go to a charity, and over the course of 5 years, at least 51% of the grants must go to Episcopal entities like your parish, diocese, or other Episcopal entity. So just know that this is something that is now available. The Episcopal Church Foundation is very proud that we've been able to put this together with the great help of the Presbyterian Foundation. And so, without further ado, I'd like to turn over our webinar now to two wonderful individuals, both of whom hold donor advised funds. And I'm going to stop sharing our screen for a moment and switch to our alternative. And I'd like to allow Sherry Hester Kenny, to lead us off today. And tell us a bit, Sherry, about your experience with donor advised funds.
Thank you, Jim. It's a privilege to be with you today. The reason I use my maiden name, by the way, is that in a certain part of the country, it's recognized. I come from a long line of Presbyterians in Texas, and before that, Arkansas. And they were generous people. And so that has really been the foundation of our giving. My background is in financial planning. I did personal financial planning for about 35 years before joining the foundation, and had some clients who had not only donor advised funds, but some who had private family foundations. And of course, most of us simply don't have the personal wealth that justifies the expense that goes along with that strategy. But I love the idea of being able to be with my husband, be with my children, and talk about the areas that we were involved in and the organizations that we wanted to give to, including many Presbyterian ministries. So we established our donor advised fund about 3 years ago. The idea was attractive. The simplicity, the ability to make contributions to one entity, but then give to many through the fund was very attractive. But it was actually a health event on my husband's part that was the impetus for us establishing the fund. My husband had a stroke. He's an architect and is doing quite well, but is not able to be the principal in a firm as he was, his own firm. And so he sold his building, sold his practice, and that created a taxable event for us in a calendar year that we were eager to mitigate with a larger contribution than we are necessarily able to make on a regular basis. And that's when we established our donor advised fund.
Well, thank you. And would you like to tell us anything more about some of how it's benefited you or your family, or some of your decisions for philanthropy today?
Well, I love the idea of being able to give on a regular, disciplined basis, which we do with a tithe to our church, but which we also do with a regular payroll deduction contribution to our donor advised fund. And so when something comes up that we want to give to, we've essentially already pre-funded that. There are a number of things in the community that we support. We support a number of Presbyterian ministries. And my son, we have two children. My son is the pastor of a small non-denominational church down in Texas. And he and his wife had the opportunity to go to Pakistan recently. And so by making a grant from our donor advised fund to their church, we were able to provide tax deductible support to this mission trip that he was making. So that's a more recent example of a way that we've used our fund.
And it's great that you're able to just at will or on a regular basis make additions, right, to the donor advised fund. It's so much more flexible and you get the deduction immediately too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then it's so easy to go online and make a grant. It's actually faster, if you can believe it, than writing a check and stamping an envelope.
That's one of the advantages. You don't have to pay for the postage or the envelope.
Exactly.
It's already underway. And a lot of younger people actually find the interface very useful, and it simplifies. People don't use checks anymore, right? So few places actually receive checks. Only churches most of the time are receiving checks. So thanks, Sherry. We'll come back to you in just a moment. Father White, thanks again for joining us. Could you tell us what inspired you? What was your context for why you created a donor advised fund?
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for asking me to be a part of the conversation. Well, a couple of things. There was my wife and I, for a number of years, had always talked about the fact of how enjoyable it would be to actually be able to participate in something like a donor advised fund, how it would be in some ways an example to our children, how we may or may not want on the last day to leave all assets that we have to our children. We may want to make some different choices. And so we had talked at some level about, in theory, about being able to do that. Many of the organizations that lead or provide donor advised funds have a very high threshold of actually getting into the fund. So I would say that had prevented us from moving forward on a number of occasions. And then in one certain year, about a year ago, we did have a tax event, which as well led us to have more income than we thought in a certain calendar year. And it was about that time that I got a notice from the Episcopal Church Foundation that you all were setting up a donor advised fund. And we made the decision to go ahead and open the fund in that year. It gave us the opportunity to go ahead and contribute a sizable amount of funds to the fund. And then we could realize we could just decide later on exactly how we wanted to distribute those funds. And in subsequent years, it's been great because we've gone ahead and actually over the course of the year increased the amount of money we are actually sharing with others through gifts by giving a specific amount to the donor advised fund, and then worrying about how that's going to play out later on. So we are able to make an annual gift to the congregation that we decide that we are going to make, and then we have our children are involved in many things in our community, and so we in our community we are able to provide gifts to many things that we've often done. Our school's PTO is a 501c3, for example. So we're able to make that simple donation that we would make every year to the PTO through our donor advised fund, for example. The recent appeal for hurricane relief from Episcopal Relief and Development, we were able to make a gift from our donor advised fund. And just numerous examples such as this. A recent memorial for the death of a young boy in my child's class, we were able to make from the donor advised fund. So it's really been a great way for us to think about our own tithing and giving.
And it's not to promise this in every year because you can't control the stock market, but some of the high returns of this year in 2017 have really benefited the charities that people wish to grant to through the Donor Advised Fund. I mean, we've seen tremendous growth in someone who gave a gift last year in October. They can give even more than what they would have ever expected because of the growth of their Donor Advised Fund over time, and that they didn't grant it out all at once, but let it sit and grow over time. So that's really interesting. Now, both of you mentioned family and family considerations, and I am just curious, how do you involve your children in any of the decisions that are being made for how you make grants and when you make grants? Go ahead, Sherry.
Go ahead, Father Scott. Well, I love the idea of that, and I intend to borrow an idea that some other friends have used, and that is to, as a Christmas gift, allocate a certain amount to each child and child-in-law for them to direct from our Donor Advised Fund as they choose to the organization of their choice. So because my son lives in Texas, I live in Colorado, my daughter's recently married and very busy, we haven't had a chance to actually sit down and actually brainstorm as a family where we want to make grants to. But there's never any shortage of wonderful opportunities. That's for sure. So, and as you know, and maybe you intend to bring this up, Jim, but there are basically two end games to the Donor Advised Fund.
Correct.
And the one that we've chosen is to name our two children as successor advisors.
Father Scott, what did you decide? I'm not recalling for when you and your wife would pass away, because obviously she would take over if you were to pass away first on advising on the Donor Advised Fund. What did you decide?
Well, we too have named our children to carry on the fund. I'm not sure that's what we will do in the end, depending on the fund and where it might be later in life. We may decide to do something different, but that is how we have set it up to begin with.
Do you feel that helps instill a sense of philanthropy in your children so that they will act likewise?
Well, most certainly. I mean, my wife and I have set up a process with our own children where any money they receive, either from us or from others, they have a third to spend, a third to save, and a third to give. So we try to do that. In the end, we haven't involved them in the process that some of their giving would be coming out of this fund, but as they get older, we intend to do that.
That's great. That's a great idea. Just as Sherry had mentioned, there's another alternative. You can obviously appoint a successor advisor to continue the philanthropic efforts you've started with the Donor Advised Fund. The other options at the Episcopal Church Foundation is that you could choose at the time you create the Donor Advised Fund to just set up an ultimate gift so that at your death and the death of whoever else is an advisor on the fund, that the assets would just be distributed directly to a variety of Episcopal entities. The other option would be to choose to create a permanent endowment for the benefit of an Episcopal parish or other institution, and those assets would be handled in the Episcopal Church Foundation's endowment program permanently, and would set up an appropriate spending rule and therefore ensure a steady flow of giving to those institutions that you would have designated. So if we could maybe change topics slightly, I'm just curious on both of your experiences, any challenges that either of you have encountered so far, specifically working with charities, where maybe you gave a Donor Advised Fund gift as a grant, and you maybe either had an issue or a problem with one of your charities, or how they interpret it, or if they didn't understand what the Donor Advised Fund check was for. Did either of you have any experience with any issues or problems?
I don't. It has been very smooth and seamless. The only thing that has come up for me once or twice is trying sometimes to find the tax ID number of an organization I'm trying to give to.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not on top of that the way that is helpful. But no, I have not encountered any issues.
Sherry, have you, I mean, the specific concern, and we've seen it in a couple of places so far, is with respect to pledging. A donor advised fund grant cannot go to an institution to which you as an individual have made a pledge. It cannot pay off a capital campaign pledge or your annual pledge if you actually made a pledge. Mm-hmm. It can certainly be made, and you can notify your parish or another institution that you intend to make grants from your donor advised fund, but it just can't pay off an obligation, and you also can't get benefits back. Like if you are going to an event and basically you're just paying for a gala event just to have a nice dinner, you can't use your donor advised fund for that. But Sherry, you've been doing your donor advised fund for several more years. Have you ever encountered things like that?
Just a couple of little issues that you touched on, Jim. About a year ago, we were invited to a gala that the Colorado Ballet was doing. And my husband had been on the ballet board, so that's an organization that we enjoy supporting. And we were going to be out of town, so we weren't able to go. And the invitation said, if you're not able to go, you can make a contribution, and a dancer will be able to attend the gala. Mm-hmm. So I wrote in the little memo line, dancer attend gala or something like that, and immediately, and the foundation does keep us honest, because the error message popped up and let me know that was not appropriate. So I just put in something like dancers for the dancers. Mm-hmm. So there is that restriction. And then the other one that you mentioned, mm-hmm. We recently made a multi-year decided to make a multi-year commitment to a school, mm-hmm. a really wonderful school in Denver. And we're careful in advising them that we did intend to make multi-year gifts, but that those would be coming from our donor advised fund. And so we weren't able to make that commitment in writing to them, but that they could expect our participation.
And that's a good caution. That's a good caution, because everyone wants to be generous and do the right thing, and that's an important thing to understand. So thank you for that. I'm just curious for both of you, what do you think has been most beneficial to you, either personally or from a philanthropic reflection sort of aspect, about your donor advised fund as you've been working with it so far? Father White, it's been somewhat new for you, but still you've actually made a lot of grants. I can tell you that's very true. You're a very generous man, and so is your wife is quite generous too. So any thoughts on that, Father White?
Well, I guess what I would say is it's quite it's been I would say something like freeing to be able to say, we are capable of giving away this amount of money each year, mm-hmm. Without having to decide first exactly how that's going to happen. We certainly have a sense of our contribution to our parish, mm-hmm. each year, but we always have my wife has been involved in nonprofits for many years, and so we always have other organizations we want to participate in, and always know that we're going to be invited to participate in giving to other organizations. So to be able, on the front end though, to be able to say, we know we're capable of giving away this amount of money of the resources that have been given to us by God each year. And then to have the actual how it's going to be distributed be a secondary question is almost quite freeing. And actually, when it comes to actually deciding to make a grant, there's there's a great sense of, I've found a great sense of joy in it because I know the money's there.
Right.
The money is there.
And being well managed.
Question. It's not in my checkbook anymore.
Right.
It's not a question of whether or not I have it to give. I do have it to give. And that has been a great sense of freedom and joy.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Sherry, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that. And Father White, I think you articulated it better than I would have been able to. But I feel that same sense of freedom. And also just the joy of giving. I think the more joy we experience, the more we find we want to give, and we choose that over other things that we might do with the many. We have been blessed beyond measure, and it is a joy to be able to share that.
That's great. You know, we're going to wrap up now, but I'm just curious, if you were to speak to someone out there who may be considering whether a donor advised fund is right for them, and it could be any sort of circumstance. It could be a younger person who just likes to give everything online and have it simplified and just make one donation one place and then control it otherwise.
That is a nice piece, I must say.
It could be somebody who's had an event business-wise. They got a large bonus. They sold their business, any sort of particular things, and they have a major tax event that's going to happen. They could simply also be in a situation where they haven't decided what type of gifts they want to give out or to whom. And perhaps they want to make a gift, they want to be charitable, but they either haven't decided, or some of them may want to let those assets grow over time before they grant them out to have an even greater impact. And so as a closing, Sherry and Father White, I'm wondering if you could just say, what do you think you would say to someone who would be in any of those situations? What do you think you would you encourage them to consider a donor advised fund? Sherry.
Well, this is a tool, and I think this is the reason it probably is the fastest growing charitable giving tool in the country, is because it does have such flexibility. Mm-hmm. As you say, if your desire is to be charitable, but you haven't necessarily decided at this point on who your major beneficiaries are going to be, the money can be invested in growing while you're making those decisions. There is everything that you mentioned made me think of a particular donor I've worked with who selected the donor advised fund giving tool for that reason. So there are just many opportunities. It is applicable in many situations, I would say.
Thank you. Father Scott, some thoughts?
Yeah, I would definitely encourage everyone to consider it. One thing, as you mentioned at the beginning, Jim, that the Episcopal Church Foundation has done is it has set the entry point for participation at $2,500. I know that the community foundation in my community starts at $10,000, and my bank starts at $5,000. So it's all different amounts, but this really has made it much more attractive to many people. And I have really enjoyed the opportunity to make a decision on what my giving capability is that isn't first based on the charity that I will be giving to. Mm-hmm. And so, and it has only increased my opportunity. In being able to do that, it's set my parameters, challenged me in my giving, and actually increased my opportunity to do so.
Well, thank you. Those are all really wonderful thoughts. So we're going to begin to wrap up. You guys can also make a final comment if you want, so you can think about that in the next few moments. But for everyone out there who's listening to our webinar today, we're happy to discuss with you whether or not a donor advised fund is the right choice for you. There are many things to consider. And we would be more than happy to discuss this with you, to share our various resources. If you are a leader of an Episcopal parish or other entity like a school, camp and conference center, or diocese, we're also more than happy to share all of our many leadership resources. We've created a new type of commitment card, we shall call it at this juncture, which can be used by leaders in parishes, and many other resources that will help the members of your parish consider their own generosity and consider whether or not a donor advised fund would be right for them. Won't be right for everyone, but just know that the Episcopal Church Foundation is here with the strong support of the Presbyterian Foundation as well, who helps us to manage these assets and the back office work that's involved. So that's it for today. Just please know, all of you that listen, that all of our webinars are recorded on our Vital Practices website, ecfvp.org, which is referenced here, and I know Father White makes good use of at his parish. Please watch for upcoming webinars, and just know that all of us here at the Episcopal Church Foundation are here to help you and assist you in fulfilling your philanthropic goals. So just final note of absolute thanks to you, Sherry, and to you, Father White. Thank you for sharing your experience and your faith on this very interesting and unique topic. And it's a tool, just as you said, Sherry. Not everyone's going to need it. Not everybody will find it useful, but many will. And that's why we wanted to do this very donor-focused webinar, to help people listen to other folks who have done this, to discover if it's right for them. Any final comments, Sherry or Father White?
I don't really have any additional comments. Just thank you so much for the privilege of participating.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. And I also thank the Episcopal Church Foundation for making this step. And you are right, it's a tool. It's not for everyone, though I would say I think it is for more people than realize it's an option and an opportunity. So it's worth checking out and asking that question.
Okay. Well, thank you both, and thank all of you for attending or listening to this webinar. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Have a great day. God bless.
Thank you.